Guys, figure I'd give a quick overview of what I got going here because I honestly haven't touched up a lot of what I've been doing here because I've been working at my first job next door, and then because we have a little warehouse here, and then I work from home a lot, and then kind of a couple hours here and there I come here and I do more work. So I guess technically I have three jobs, but it's all good. Um, just just making the monies and just enjoy what I'm doing. But to give you an idea, I build on a budget. Old cars usually end up being 70s, but a few 60s here and there, and then occasionally I have an 80s car that's worth building on, and I build those too. Um, but like for example, I have a 1973 Lincoln Continental right here. I've had several of these. Um, I'm painting the top because the vinyl on the top was absolutely done for. But so I figure instead of putting a new vinyl top on it, I'll just go the whole 9 yards and paint it. And I'm not exactly a body shop guy, but with a little bit of work and patience, it's not that hard. I just don't like doing it. I do everything else other than body work, or more painting than body work. But check this out. See? Yeah, she's pretty. This one is mine. Well, I guess technically all the ones here are mine. I've had this one for a long time. There's a long story behind this one. This one actually, funny enough, went to a lot of Salt Lake City gay parades, which is kind of funny. And so if I go through, I used to live in Salt Lake area for a short time, and every time I would take this out, people would recognize it. Um, it's kind of funny. And I actually, just for fun, there's these tiny little, yeah, these little pinkish purplish valve covers or caps, and the previous owners put them there as a joke, a joke of somebody else's, and I've kept them on there just to continue the name, I guess. Have a little bit of a touch from the previous owner. But I've actually done a lot of work to this car. But I've had a lot. This is my third 70s, no, fourth 70s Lincoln. This is my second 73 Lincoln Continental. The other one that I had was not quite as nice, and I ended up getting rid of that one to someone who needed the body panels off of it, and the fenders, and most of the quarter panels, and then the where the rear glass sits, there's a spot underneath where it likes to rust, and that one wasn't in too bad a shape. It did have some rust, but it was doable, and his was a lot worse, so he ended up taking that. Before I sold it, I ended up stripping all of the trim, the dash, the interior, all of it. So I have, for this car, I literally have like boxes and boxes and boxes of parts. And I have some parts for some other Lincolns too, but and then I've had all kinds of Buicks and Pontiacs, Chevys. I've actually owned, technically now, more Lincolns than I have anything else, but I'm more of a GM guy. It's kind of funny. But I keep winding up with these Lincolns because I've always had Lincolns in here because in the family we grew up on Lincolns, especially with my grandpa. He had all kinds of Lincolns. He had so many of them, and honestly, one of the first cars I ever drove was a '95 Lincoln Town Car. So I guess that just I caught the Lincoln bug. But I mean, this is just one of them. And put the cover back on. Or actually, no, I could show the engine real quick. I built the engine as well. This hood is like 100 pounds, by the way. So There's the engine. Hey, I built a couple 460s. They're like in the mid price range. It's like a little bit more expensive than building like a Chevy small block, but not near as expensive as building any Buick or Pontiac motor or some of the motors now. Um, yeah, I mean it's not that bad. It's kind of clean. Some of the paint's coming off the air cleaner a little bit. I gotta repaint that again. I'm not a body guy, so get this back down. One of these hinges is sticking a little bit. That's a Ford thing. There we go. So it doesn't like to go down evenly. Get this back on. Yeah, this car specifically has been one of the nicer cars that I've owned. I've owned a lot. I've owned close to 30 cars over the last 3 years. Most of them old, like this. Oh, there we go. It's kind of I made it a tight fit, sort of like a fitted sheet. So sometimes it's a little pain in the butt to get back on. There we go. And then I pick up a lot of cars and I build on them and sell them. I usually make a little bit of profit. I've only ever been under one time, and I learned from that. I always at least break even, so it works. I mean, again, it's like on the side, but there's a teaser to another Lincoln that I just picked up. This one's pretty cool. Yeah, I got the 67 over there. See if I can get some light going. Go around here. See if we can see that. Hey. Yeah, so that one's a 76 Mark IV. It's pretty clean. It's a Cartier. It's not just any typical Mark IV. It's the last one of the year, 76. And then here's my 67 Continental Coupe. This one's not going to be for sale anytime soon, and I put a lot more work into it than I can profit from, honestly. It was a junk car when I got it. Someone ended up rearing another car that I had, and my insurance gave me a hefty check, and I was like, and that one was for sale. A friend of a friend had it. He just pulled it from the junkyard, but didn't want to do anything with it. He just had a kid, and I was like, I'll take it off your hands, and the rest is history. But it was a pain. Everything in that car I've touched at this point. Everything. Every inch of that car. When I got it, wasn't even close to being even drivable, let alone legally drivable and safely. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what I do between my other two jobs. Because my first job, I'm a computer tech, software engineer, and web designer, and a bunch of other stuff. You do a little bit of everything. And I get off 4 or 5 o'clock from early in the morning to about 4 or 5 o'clock, and then I end up going home and working home more, about 7 to 9 o'clock ish. Between those two times, I come here and work a little bit. Like this top that I'm taking forever with. It's been like 2 weeks now. I've had to do so much body filling on this thing because there were so many little rust dimples all over the place where the vinyl top had trapped water and rusted it out a little bit. There was a couple pin size, needle size holes. It wasn't that bad. I got really lucky. I basically started just in time. If I had waited a couple more years, it would have been pretty bad. But yeah, good stuff. Matter of fact, I can actually show the inside of the 76. Excuse me. I wish I still had and I also have an 88 Lincoln Town Car. We have an 84 Furo SE. I had another Furo GT that I actually pulled the subframe out, built the transmission, built the motor, did a bunch of work on the electronics, everything else on it, headlights, blah, 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 because they have flip-up headlights. They use the same or very similar Corvette motors for the headlights like they do in the 80s. Always have to rebuild them. It's a GM thing. And then I have a little beater donor car that was given to me as a 96 Sunfire that I rebuilt the motor in about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And buddy slid on some ice, hit a guardrail with it, and then he just gave it to me because no one would buy it. So I ended up popping out all the fenders and getting it reasonably straight again because the frame is bent by just like an inch. So the panels don't line up quite right, but I got it all working good and looking decent. Not that it's like looking horrible and wrecked, but that's just whatever. So I deal with cars like that too. Is what it is. But I've had 60s Buicks. I've had a couple Pontiacs, and I mean my first project car was a '74 Firebird, biggest hunk of junk ever. But it was a cool car, especially as a first old car. Everything on it was pretty simple, and it ran okay. It was before I really knew what I was doing. But ever since then, I've had all kinds of Buicks, and now I've had all kinds of Lincolns. I've worked on countless cars. Anything from the earliest car I've worked on was a '64 Electra 225 deuce and a quarter, as they call it, and then all the way up to cars now. I mean, touched up on a little bit of everything because sometimes people will come in and I'll do small jobs for them for like $60 an hour. Usually doesn't take me more than 2-3 hours per job, so extra money. I got the shop space, like why not? I only pay a couple $100 for this shop space, so it's not bad. So yeah, that's what I got going on here. So while I'm also a digital artist illustrator, and man, this phone makes my face look really pasty. But while I'm also a computer tech and blah blah blah, and then I'm also an artist, blah blah blah, web designer, whatever. I also am an old car enthusiast. Like I freaking love old cars. They're great. A lot of people would argue that, but with an old car, you build it right, and from that point forward, you rarely ever need to do anything major to it as long as you do it right. Just basic maintenance, and it'll last you forever if you take care of it. And that's just like this red Continental here, I've had for like 3 years now or so, and it's never without my fault because I've built the engine and a couple things happened with it. But the only major issue this car has ever given me is that the steering gearbox leaks. That's it. Everything else on this car, other than having to redo the top now, because that's a 70s thing. Anything with the vinyl top is eventually going to rust. The 76 that I got to pull the vinyl off, pretty much do the exact same thing. Cool thing with that is it literally covers half the car. Like a third of what this is, so the job will be a lot easier. And quite frankly, I mean, it's gray. Like the color's gonna be easy. I might actually put like a white or a dark gray up there, but whatever. But other than having to redo the top, which I kind of figured would happen anyway, this is giving me no major mechanical issues, ever. Without me making some dumb mistake somewhere. Like one time, I put in a cam and I didn't break it in right because I was rushing it. Sheared off a cam load, had to do it again. That's the biggest issue I've ever had with this. And then one time, because I forgot to put the air cleaner back, or not the air cleaner, but the air filter back in the air cleaner, I was cruising through Idaho, like, doing the typical 80 to 90 miles an hour because it's, highways huge there. And you can go 85, no problem. And suddenly, like, when I came up to a truck stop to refill with gas, because, I mean, you'll go 100 miles and not see a gas station sometimes. The car started, like, bogging, blah, 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 like it was going to die. And it took a good minute to figure out, but what had happened is a tiny little bug, and I think it was a spider, because I pulled it out, was sucked into the carburetor and was sucked into one of the little idle air circuit holes in the Holley carburetor. And so basically I was running extremely rich on the idle circuit. It was so bad, and it was a tiny little bug. Tore the whole carburetor apart, cleaned it out, and then like one of the holes I stuck the carb cleaner through, and out shoots a little spider. That was pretty gnarly. Other than that, this car has never really given me any major issues. It's been a pretty good car. And then I have a '88 town car that I drive daily, and that thing is sweet. Like, I've worked on a couple of Panther chassis cars, the Crown Vic, the town car, the Mercury Grand Marquis, all that the same chassis, and they're all really good cars, and they're very easy to work on. They're basically the last good, easy to deal with fuel injection type kind of cars, and the parts are dirt cheap. I mean, it's just a 302 with fuel injection on the top, and I use that daily. And I mean, I got to work on it right now because I have a head gasket leak, but other than that, it's been like reliable as hell. Uncanny how reliable it is. Like, it has a head gasket leak because it's got a compression leak between cylinder 1 and 2. So it runs extremely lean, well, not extremely lean, but it runs lean enough where it'll like hesitate and backfire a tiny bit here and there if you're going up a hill or something. And it took me forever to figure that out because that usually doesn't happen. But even if I still drive it right now, driving like crap, it'll still run and run and run and run, and I still get like 18 to 20 in the city, and then 25 to 28 on the highway in gas mileage, which is like, for a 4,000-pound car with a 302 in it, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, like love it. And I've had several of those town cars, the 80s town cars. And then during the summer, I'm actually picking up it looks a lot like this, but it's a 76, same year as that Mark. 76 Lincoln Continental town car. Basically, it's like this 4-door, but has that little oval window on the 4-door, and it's the front end and rear end look more like a town car than they do a Continental, and that's basically all it is. Other than that, everything else is pretty much the same as this Continental. So I'm picking that up for like $900 here pretty soon. It's also got a 460. That's got a 460. Super easy to work on. They're gas hogs. Super duper gas hogs. Honestly, my 67 with a 462 in it, which is different, completely different, similar but completely different, has better gas mileage than any of these do because of the 460. The 460 is just, it's just a gas hog. And the reason why, or the biggest reason why, is the design of the heads. You have a ginormous intake port, and then you have a teeny tiny little exhaust port, and it helps with torque, your bottom end range. But man, it just guzzles that gas like an alcoholic. But yeah, so this is what we got going on here. Technically, this is not a business right now. I thought about turning it into a business, but I think I'm gonna wait. If I do, and it would be a restoration shop, a small gig kind of restoration shop. Not that it would be like a legit full-on shop to do everything, because it was just too much hassle. I have my own business name for my illustrations and whatnot that I work at home for, and that's a pain enough as it is. I mean, it's a pain in the ass owning a business, even if it's a small one, like taxes, fees. You gotta deal with the IRS, you gotta deal with the government, you gotta deal with so much BS. But yeah, That's, and I mean, it's not like I have a crazy setup. I mean, I got a bunch of parts. I have boxes and boxes of more parts. I got like a computer, desk, and all that. Got a nice sound system plugged in. Got a drill press. Got plenty of hand tools and drills and whatnot. You can do just about anything other than weld. And honestly, there's a guy in front of me who does really good work and welding, and there's a guy behind me that also does work, not welding. So if ever I run any issues, I just pay them. They're like, here, you have it. I'll pay you. Fix it, because I don't have time. Like the steering gearbox leak on this one. To pull the steering gearbox out of these is a pain because it's squished in there. It's a pain. Honestly, it's easier on that mark than it is this one, but that mark it's a lot more complicated to work on than this one because this one's simpler in design. But this one, the steering gearbox, I mean, it's like squished up in there right underneath the exhaust header, and it's like inches away from the side of the block, and it's a pain. So I'm just gonna have them deal with it. And yeah, and then saying I gotta weld on a muffler. This thing is straight pipe all the way to about halfway down the car, so it's loud as shit. It's fun, but it's really loud. And then I have like I mean, it's not a crazy build or anything, but I have a cam in it, intake, all of that. I have a Holley 750 on it, MSD electronic ignition, blah blah blah. I have the heads ported a little bit, so it's a little quick. It's definitely quick for what it is. Like, I can keep up with any average car or any decently quick car with this ginormous 5,400-pound Lincoln. So, I mean, that works. This thing loves the cruise, man. Like, when you get going on the highway, you can kind of feel that the cam is starting to really kick in, and then you have a lot more top end than normal stock. Stock is a dog. Like, that 76 is stock, and I think it takes like 10 seconds, 0 to 60, something like that. Complete dog. I mean, you have a 460 cubic inch motor, and you're only making like 220 horsepower with it. I mean, that's bad. Like, that's really bad. They retarded the crank by 8 degrees for emissions. They put a crap load of emissions bullshit on it. They got this horrible EGR set up. They got a smog pump on it. The smog pump, actually, the design of it, it's very simple. It works, but it is a smog pump. It robs horsepower. The AC compressor on these old Fords are like the size of a warhead. I mean, they're huge. They're ginormous. Any GM one's like half the size. I mean, they're bigger than most batteries. Like car batteries. They're huge and they're heavy and they rob horsepower. And I mean, just taking all that stuff off already gives you another like 30-ish horsepower. And then putting the crank back at 0 degrees, that gives you another like 30, 40 horsepower. That alone will wake it up. And then putting a decent, like an RV cam or something, or a late 60s 460 cam off of a police interceptor, because they didn't have the emissions regulations because they were police cars. That'll get you up to like with emissions gone, cam, that alone, and a decent carburetor will get you like close to like 350, 320 horsepower, something like that. Yeah. Because the 462 that I have in my 67, that makes over 500 foot-pounds of torque at about 2,500 RPM or 2,300 RPM, something like that. And it has almost 400 horsepower at about the same RPM range. And it's definitely quicker than these stock 70s Lincolns, and that's the emissions era for you. But I guess I'm rambling at this point. But I'm here to work on the mark a little bit more because I just brought that in. it was this person had it. This guy had it, and he passed away. But before he passed away, he did a bunch of body work to it. And the more I dig into it, the more I'm seeing it. He did a bunch of body work to it, and so he passed away. And before he passed away, it was parked outside, out in this Washington state weather where it rains a lot, and just sat there for over 10 years. And then when he passed away some time ago, the daughter inherited it, and it just continued to sit outside. She didn't even want it. And she had it up for sale for years. And I offered her $700 for it because, I mean, I got to redo the top. The engine needs some work. It is low mileage, but it doesn't matter at this point because it's been sitting for so long. It's just rotting away. Half the electronics don't work. The lights are absolute crap. There's because of the leak that it's had on the passenger side in the back, and I mean there's a hole that big where the trim goes through the body, covering up the edge of the vinyl. There's mold in there. I've had to clean, not bad, but bad enough that I clean up. There's all kinds of dumb things wrong with it. So I was like, listen, I'll give you $700 for it and call it even. And so she took it. So $700, and there you go, another one. This red Continental, $1,700. I had a '73 Electra that was as nice as this one, or almost as nice as this one. That had a very rare factory triple black paint job. It was if I remember right, it was one of the first within 1,000 on the serial, not serial, the VIN number. It was one of the first 1,000 made for '73. And if you know anything about Buicks, I mean most GM cars, period, 71, 72, 73, 74, and almost every single year after that, they've changed them every single year, especially 71, 2, and 3. So the Buick Electra especially, I mean, there was a big difference in the front end and then the rear end, but most of the front end from 71, 72, 73, and I had a 73. 1 year only car, and I'd done a lot of work to it, rebuilt the motor a second time, took it out for a test drive, and someone T-boned it. Done. Waste of a car now. So my insurance bought me this, and that's how I got a hold of that. But that was only $1,700. Most of the cars I buy are under $1,000. The 67 is the most expensive one I've ever bought. It was I think it was $2,500 or $3,000. I can't remember. I think it was $2,500. Insurance bought that too. Most of the cars I've had were under $1,000. The '73 Electra that I had that got T-boned, $800. Or actually no, talked it down. It was originally $900, talked it down to $800, and then talked it down to $700. Worked on it in the guy's backyard just to get it running, and drove it home. But it was rotting away in his backyard, just like this '76, and it's usually how I get these. I had a '66 Buick that was rotting away in woods. It was a shell. It was a rolling shell. They put a 305 commercial truck in it with a 350 transmission drivetrain. The other '73 Continental that I had was in a tow yard and hadn't been touched in over a year. Had been abandoned for about a year before he picked it up. So God knows how long it had been sitting, but it was completely intact. No dents, dings, anything. A tiny bit of rust. It wasn't as nice as this one, but it was completely straight. Picked that up for $400. Built the 460 in it and everything. Actually ended up pulling the 460 out of it. Stripped the whole thing. Sold it for $500. So that was kind of cool. 74 Firebird. Bought it for $600. Sold it for a little over $1,000. What else? There was another '70s Lincoln that I had. It was another Continental. Sold that. I had a '74 Buick LeSabre. Built the top end of that motor. Ended up crapping out on me later and sold that. I bought it for $800. After it crapped out on me, I stripped off the top end of the motor to keep all the parts that I added onto it because I had a very rare, I think it was a 430 intake on it. And it was not that it was just a 430 intake, but it was a rare option that the 430 came with in the 60s. But it fit on the 455. I stripped it down, took some parts off of it, and sold it for $1,000 because I couldn't afford to keep it and build it up because we were moving. Actually, really missed that car. What else? I've had so many, but yeah, most of them were under $1,000. And if you look in the right places and you know how to work on them, you can find them under $1,000. I mean, you can find them in junkyards for. There's another. I think it's a 75 or maybe 76 Mark IV at a junkyard nearby that had. I mean, it's just as nice, dirty, just as nice as that one. It's completely white vinyl top, white paint job, 460. It's completely intact. I mean, it might be picked apart by now, but only wanted $900 for it. No idea if it ran or anything, but and then they have one of these. Well, 74. There's a 74 Continental. It'd been picked on a little bit, like people took parts off it a little bit. They only wanted like $700 for that one. There was a 64 Buick Electra that had a 6-window option. Basically, it's one of a few thousand ever made, or like I think there's only a couple hundred left in the world or something like that. It's a very rare option. The only thing it needed was the rear passenger door had been smashed, and there was a one good solid dent in the door you could easily pull out, and the window is a very simple, almost perfectly square shape, so very easy to replicate. Only one had $700 for it. Had the 425 nailhead Buick motor in it. So many other cars I've seen or been through. Yeah. But they require work and lots of patience. And then the higher the gas prices get, the more people don't want them. I mean, unless you know people, which, I mean, I do, but the typical person would see these and be like, nah. And honestly, like these Lincolns, a lot of times you can't, unless you wait and you're patient, you can't sell them more than like $3 or $4 grand. So it's some cars you get, it's hard to make money off of, even if they're clean and pristine. You have to wait until there's somebody who comes around who wants that one in particular. Sometimes people have them shipped from halfway across the country. Dealt with that before. Heck, I even got someone in Germany right now who is thinking about having me get one of these marks and build it and ship it to him. Just what it is, I guess. But yeah, I guess at this point I'm gonna call this a Lincoln shop. There's so many Lincolns. And I got so many spare parts. I mean, just on the shelf there, I got several look at this. There's only one Lincoln air cleaner on there. Well, Ford air cleaner. The other two are, one's a Buick, one's a Chevy. But I have several more 460s air cleaners in boxes that are in Lincolns, and it's fun. But yeah, that's about the gist of it. If you work hard enough, you want something bad enough, you'll get it. This is my second time having a shop space. This one's a lot nicer than the last one. I've worked on them at home, in carports, whatever. Now I'm working my ass off, but I got, this because of it. You work hard, you get rewards from it. I'm in my mid-20s, so I mean, I guess that counts for something. If you want something bad enough, you'll get it. Gotta work hard for it. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been a learning process. Well, alrighty guys, catch you in the next video.